Hi, my name is Charles Nero, and I will be presenting on Gaius Valerius Catullus. Some background information on Catullus. Catullus was born in Verona, Italy in 84 BCE to a wealthy, well-connected family. Although in some of his literary work he complained about living in poverty, sources have confirmed that that is not true, and you can even tell by his poetry that he was a wealthy man, and he was definitely a member of the Roman elite. He supposedly died in 54 BCE at the age of 30, and Catullus spent most of his early adult life in Rome, and that's where he formed many personal relationships with prominent political figures such as Julius Caesar and Cicero. His relationship with Cicero was interesting. I would describe it as a love-hate relationship because the two often criticized each other's literary work and literary styles, but they still seemed to have a personal relationship. I wouldn't go as far to say they were friends, but I would say they were acquaintances of some sort. Literary works of Catullus. Catullus was described as a neoteric lyric poet, which basically means he didn't conform to the standard of poetry. And the standard of poetry at that time was basically traditions of Homer. So, for example, describing it like the journey of an ancient hero or something along those lines. And the genre Catullus mainly focused on was romance, and he also mainly focused on his personal life, like anything that was happening in his personal life. It didn't necessarily have to be his love life, but I remember there were some poems about the death of his brother, but mainly he focused on romance. And he wrote over 25 poems about his mistress named Lesbia. Catullus has approximately 116 surviving poems, which can be divided into 3 categories: 60 short poems, which were also known as the polymetrics, 8 long poems, and 48 epigrams. He was also greatly influenced by other Roman poets, such as Ovid. In my presentation, I have chosen to analyze 3 of Catullus's poems, and the first one that I'm going to analyze is Poem 5, Let Us Live, My Lesbia, Let Us Love. In this poem, Catullus is encouraging his lover Lesbia to ignore the comments and judgmental views of others around him and to love him regardless. And this is where things get interesting. Lesbia is actually believed to be known as Claudia, who was married to a Roman statesman named Clodius, which would explain why their relationship is so problematic, because it's actually an affair. I believe he used the words our brief light to describe their life and how they should live for each other while they're capable of doing so. And in the next line there's a contrast as he uses the words everlasting sleep to describe death, and I also noticed that he most likely doesn't believe in the afterlife if he describes death as everlasting sleep. But he does believe in the supernatural, because he then talks about evil eye, which is a phrase normally associated with witchcraft. And he also repeats many times about how he wants to kiss Lesbia endlessly. And in many of his poems, he describes how he wants to just love her endlessly, especially in Poem 7, which I did not include in the presentation. But if you guys want to check it out, they are available. And the next poem I decided to analyze was Poem 16, A Rebuke to Aurelius and Furius. This poem is an aggressive defense against the critics of his erotic writing style. He focuses his statement on the two men in question, Aurelius and Furius. In the first line was the most interesting for me, because it just really grabs your attention, because you wouldn't really expect a poet who lived in ancient Rome to say vulgar things such as this, because it's not really common. But basically, he was just threatening the two men in question, who criticized him for being immoral and immodest. I don't want to repeat what he said because it's quite vulgar. But the mood becomes less aggressive as you go into the poem. He mocks the pair. He describes them as boys with stiff loins due to their immaturity, and he also says that they can't handle the description of his sexual experiences with Lesbia because they're immature. And finally, he makes a very powerful statement in which he basically says it doesn't make him less of a man if he describes his feelings and his love for Lesbia. Okay, the last poem I decided to analyze was Love or Hate. And this poem is really short, so I guess I can just read it. I hate and love, and why, perhaps you'll ask. I don't know, but I feel, and I'm tormented. Okay, to me, this short epigram was basically describing his conflicting feelings towards his lover, Lesbia. And I found this poem interesting because you realize that Catullus knows that his relationship with Lesbia is self-detrimental and is the source of his pain, but he'd rather suffer than to lose her. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation.